Hey Mauricio and George, this is Simon, and this is the second video I'm uploading on YouTube just to basically show you a quick refresher on how to do question type 1 and 2. In the first video I showed you question type 3 and 4 because Mauricio had asked how to do those. He felt a little bit confused about them, so I wanted to show him how to do that in a video that really kind of walked him through it. And I thought at the end of the video, it might be beneficial just to upload the first and second type of question as well, because I know you guys are probably going to study question type 3 and 4 so much tonight that you might forget or start to doubt yourself when you start doing question type 1 and 2 when you're studying later. And I know that we only have one session left before your test, which is tomorrow. We have a 5 to 8 session. It's an open lab, but you're probably going to be studying a lot of times before that and after that. And having these videos, like I said, just might be beneficial. So hopefully it is, and that's why I'm making these. So let's get into question type 1 and 2. Basically, the first question I still believe is the hardest because question type 2, 3, and 4 are very similar to each other. Question type 1 is the one that's just the most bizarre, and it's the one that feels like there's steps that you have to do that are easily forgettable. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Again, you guys are actually really good with question type 1 and I think question type 2, so this should be just a refresher, but I'm going to try my best to really explain this so you really understand it, just in case you have any questions. So the first question says, for the following network address and conditions, calculate the information listed below. Network address is 189.70.4.3, and we have a subnet mask this time. It says 255.255.254.0. Now, this question is basically saying, here's an IP address. It's already been subnetted, and we know that because there's a subnet mask. And it's saying, what is the range of the subnet that this network IP address belongs to? So, unlike the second, third, and fourth question, where you have to find which subnet it is, we don't even know which one. It could be the fourth, it could be the eighth. We don't care. We just want to know what is the range of the subnet that this IP address will belong to. So, as always, you start with finding the class, and in this case, unlike the other questions, it actually does ask you for a default subnet mask, but even if it didn't, you're going to put it in there anyway. So first thing is, it's a class B, and we know that because it starts with 189, and you have to just memorize it. When it's class B, we know that the default subnet mask is 255.255.0.0. Cool. So why do we need to know that? Well, we have a subnet mask here, and we have to basically compare the default subnet mask with this subnet mask to tell us where are our host bits, where are our subnet bits, and where are the network bits. Remember, default subnet mask only has a network bits and host bits, but no subnet bits. So what the default subnet mask is really going to look like is like this. Okay, so I don't know if that's clear to see, but basically we're going to have 2 octets full of N's, which is our network bits, and 2 octets full of H's, which are our host bits. The subnet mask, though, it's different because the first 2 octets are 255, they're the same, but the last 2 octets are different. We have a 00, and the subnet mask has a 254.0. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to figure out how many bits are we turning on. Remember, the host bits are always zeros, but subnet bits and network bits are ones. Okay? So we know that all of these guys are going to be ones, so we don't have to worry about them. We don't even have to care. If you want, you can technically just put the ones down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But these guys, all these zeros, they're going to have to change somehow. And remember the subnet bits that we're changing, so these zeros that are going to end up being ones, we're going to go from the left to the right. Alright, so we have to figure that out first. And how we figure that out is all we do, we take this 254 that's here, and we just try to figure out what would that be in binary. So you're just going to say basically 254, take away, and then just start from the very left of your 8-bit octet. Okay, so the first bit to the left equals 128. And you say, can I subtract 128 from this number, 254? And in this case, we can. So we can say 128, okay? And you just figure that out. In this case, we can get, here we go, it'll be 1, then 2, and then 4, something like that. I don't know if I did that right. No. 6. There we go. My math isn't great, but you're going to have 126, and then you're going to say, okay, cool. So we know there's going to be at least one subnet bit. And now we say, okay, well, we've done the 128. The next number we had is 126. Can we subtract 64 from 126? And you can. So you can say, take away 64 and figure that out. Now on paper it's easier to do compared to Notepad, and in this case we have a really easy one. We have 254, so you already know that technically it's just one bit that we're missing to get 255. So what's going to happen is we're going to have an octet that looks like this: 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you count all those up, basically that's going to give us 254. So that's not too bad. And with that being done, I also like to just remind myself by changing these H's to S's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just so we know which ones are subnet bits. So now that if you calculate all this and convert this from binary to decimal, you're going to get this: 255.255.254.0. And that's how we figured out how many subnet bits we need compared to how many hosts we actually need. We have 7 subnet bits and we have 9 host bits. Alright, awesome. But that didn't really answer anything yet, because the next question is the subnet address. So what we have to do is we have to basically look at, first of all, the network bits are going to be the same and we're not going to change them. So you can put in the decimal number of any of the network bits. So the 2 octets that have network bits are 189.70. So feel free to put that in. That's never going to change. The next part that's going to change is this third octet, which is the one that has subnet bits. Now, feel free to do what you want, but I don't really care about anything that has just host bits. So in this case, because the third octet is the only one that has subnet bits, that's the only one I'm going to care about. I don't care about these because, remember, host bits are going to be zeros. So in the end, no matter what I calculate, this 3 isn't going to matter because I'm not going to calculate 3. Host bits are going to be all zeros when you're looking at the subnet address, so that 3 is going to turn into a 0 anyway. So I don't care. The only thing I care about are any of the octets that have subnet bits. If both of these had subnet bits in them, if octet 3 and 4 had subnet bits, then I would care. Then I would have to calculate the 4 and the 3 and kind of compare them and figure out which ones are going to, like, which are the subnet bits and how are they going to change. But in this case, we only have the 1 octet with subnet bits, so that's the only one I really care about. And what I mean by I care about them, why they're important, is I'm going to write them down, okay? So how many subnet bits do I actually have? I have 7. So write them down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. And then if you want, you can write them down as ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But we're not going to keep them all as ones. We have to basically look at this guy right here. This third octet, this is the one that has the subnet bits. We have to convert that into binary. So let's convert that into binary. So this one's pretty easy because it's 4, and as you can see up here, we actually have one bit that represents 4. So we're just going to write that in. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, 1, 0, 0. Now you're going to notice that I put 7 subnet bits here, but this is how you convert that 4 here into an 8-bit value. 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Erase that last one. Make sure it lines up with this one. We don't care about anything after. Even though there's a host bit here, there is a bit here. We're not getting rid of the 8 bits. In this case, this host bit here is going to end up turning to 0 anyway. So even though this is 0, and that's great, that just lines up with what we want, technically, if the number we are looking for was 5, that would mean that the binary number is this, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1. But remember, we only have 5 subnet bits. Sorry, 7 subnet bits. We have 7 subnet bits, which means this last one is going to be a host bit. And host bits are zeros. We're starting with 0, so this 1 doesn't even count. We're going to have to change it to 0 anyway. So this is what you want right here. And that is what you're going to end up plugging in to your subnet bits. So plug that in here. And make sure all the hosts, these guys, or these guys, are all zeros. And now convert all of this into decimal. So we have the 189.70, that's not going to change, but now we have to look at this guy. And when you convert that, this one's easy because basically it's just the 4 still. We're going to get 4. But now, instead of 3 here, which I told you is host bits, so we don't care about that number anymore, it's going to be a 0. And that's it. That's how you figure out the subnet address. Now the first usable, you guys know, is just adding 1 to that number. So 4.1 is going to be your first usable. The last usable is not something we care about until we figure out the broadcast address. Now with the broadcast address, what you're going to do is you're going to take all those host bits and change them from zeros to ones. That's it. So all these guys, we're going to go 1.11111111, and now just convert these new guys into decimal. So notice this one is a 4, and now there's a 1 here, which means that's going to be 5. So we're going to have 189.70.5, and then all these ones equal 255. And now we can find the last usable, which is 189.70.5. 254, because we're just subtracting 1 from the broadcast address. And if it was 255, that means this guy's 254. And that's it. Now you can figure out the number of subnets, and that's pretty easy. We determined that there was 7 of them. So we're going to say 2 to the power of 7, and that tells us it's 128. So that's cool. And number of hosts. Number of usable hosts, and we're going to say 2 to the power of, in this case it's 9 because we have 8 here and then 1 here, but we're going to subtract 2 because we don't count the broadcast or the subnet address, and this guy is going to be 512 take away 2, which equals 510. And that's it. That's how you figure out your first type of question. So in my opinion, that's the hardest because there's so many things you have to do, and because it's unlike the other ones, it's kind of hard to remember. But if you can get this down, and you guys have done a really good job of getting this down, it's not a problem. So hopefully that does help. So let's move on to question type 2. So question type 2 is now saying we need to create subnets, and we need to figure out, in question type 2 specifically, what is the range of the 4th available subnet. So it says, given the following network address and conditions, calculate the information listed below the 4th available subnet. Network address is 130.6.9.7, and you need 37 subnets with as many hosts per subnet as possible. And I already told you in the first video, these questions are basically going to tell you which you need to prioritize, and in this case it wants us to prioritize the subnet bits because we need to have 37 subnets, and then whatever comes after the subnet bits, whatever's left over, will be our host bits. So it's different than question type 3, but the nice thing about this one is we don't have to worry about subtracting 2. We only subtract 2 when we're looking for host bits. Subnet bits, we don't have to worry about that anymore, so that's really good. And with this guy too, once you figure out the subnet bits, you can put them right after the network bits, and then once you're done that, the remainder will be host bits. So it's kind of more natural to put these down, whereas opposed to when you find the host bits first, you write those down, but you have to write kind of right to left. So I find this one's a lot easier than the third type of question, just in that respect. But everything else is the exact same, so I don't think you'll have a problem. So let's just start with it. Let's start with what I tell you all the time. Find the class, which is going to tell you the default subnet mask. And even though it doesn't tell you to write here, write it down. So in this case, class B, because it's 130, that's what the first octet says, and the default subnet mask is once again 255.255.0.0. Okay, so we got that down, so that's awesome. but we don't have a subnet mask yet. We have to determine the subnet mask. So the only way to determine the subnet mask is to look at the requirements that we need. We need 37 subnets. So 37 subnets tells us something. It tells us how many subnet bits we need, because we're going to look at this guy up here and we're going to say, what's the first bit that satisfies 37? So obviously we see a 32, and that seems close, but that doesn't satisfy the rule. 64 does though, so that's what we're going to look at. We're going to say 2 to the power of something is going to give us 64, and that something is how many bits we're going to use for subnet bits. And in this case, remember, just to reiterate, we're dealing with subnets. So if this had said we need 64 subnets, you can use 64, or basically 2 to the power of whatever to get 64. You can use this 64 no problem. It's only hosts that you need to pay in mind that you need to take away 2. Subnets, you don't have to. So if it said 64, you can use the 64. But it doesn't. It says 37. We're still going to use 64 because that's the first number that satisfies 37. So let's figure that out. 2 to the power of what is going to give us 64. And like in the first video I told you, remember, don't assume that because this is the 7th bit, that's 2 to the power of 7. 2 to the power of 7 is actually 128. It is 2 to the power of 6 that will give us 64. So just be careful of that. Like I said to you, it's not, if you say 2 to the power of 1, it's not going to equal 1. It's going to equal 2. 2 to the power of 0 equals 1. So you have to just always keep that in mind. Don't get caught up in that. I know one of you, I think it's George, but it may be Mauricio as well. Sometimes we mess that up and we think, okay, well, because I'm dealing with 64 and that's the 7th bit, it's 2 to the power of 7, but it's not. It's actually the number below it, which is 6. So hopefully that makes sense, but because 2 to the power of 6 equals 64, that means we're using 6 subnet bits. All right, cool. So remember, the 255s are not going to change. Those are our network bits. So I'm just going to deal with the last 2 octets. And if we need 6 subnet bits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, well, 2 octets is going to equal 16. So all I'm going to do is say 16, take away the ones that I have here, which is 6, and that's going to leave me with 10. So right away, I know that we're going to say 1, 2, because there's 2 left in this octet, dot 8 H's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. So there we go. We have our 10 host bits and we have our 6 subnet bits. And what you can do is simply convert that into ones and zeros. Remember, subnet bits are your ones and your host bits are your zeros. And convert that into binary. Remember, the network bits are going to be just all ones, which is 255. So that should be an easy answer for you. So the subnet mask will be 255, 255, because those network bits aren't going to change. And then we have to calculate this guy out. And however you want to calculate it is fine with me, as long as you get the answer. The way that I typically do it, especially something like this, if I haven't memorized it, you can simply go 255, take away 1, take away 2. Because these 2 we're not using, so basically you're taking away 3, right? And then just figure that out. It should be 252. Alright, so we're going to say 252.0 because all these guys are zeros. And that's it. So that is pretty simple. But now we have to find the subnet address. And the subnet address requires us to remember that we're really looking for the 4th available subnet. And like I showed you in the first video, how we do that is we take all the subnet bits, so in this case there's 6, and we write down 6 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you had 8 bits, you write down 8 zeros. If you had 12, you write down 12 zeros. If you had 2, you just write down 2 zeros. But write as many zeros as there are subnet bits, because that will be your first subnet. And then just count up until you get your in this case, fourth available subnet. So that's the second, third, and fourth. There we go. So now we know what the fourth subnet is going to look like. So what we're going to do, copy that, and then what we'll do is we'll paste it down here. We have 2 host bits left, so we have to put the zeros in, and the rest are going to be all zeros. So all we're going to do is now we're going to convert that into binary. So remember, the first 2 octets are going to stay the same, 130.6, because those are network bits. And then we just have to calculate this guy here, really, because the fourth octet is all zeros still. So in this case, we have a 4, and we have an 8. So that's 12. So we're going to say 12.0, and there's your subnet address. And then first usable, just add 1. Last usable we'll wait on. Broadcast address, we're just going to change all those host bits to 1s. So all these guys, and then these 2 are going to now be 1s. So 1, 1, and then all these guys are 1, 1, 1, 1. There we go. And we will convert that into a decimal from binary. So once again, 130.6 is normal, but now this third octet has changed a bit because it was 12 because of these 2 1s were there, but we had zeros here. So now we have to add these guys into the mix. So it was 12, but we're adding 3 because it's 1 and 2. So it's 3. 8 and 4 was 12. So what we got is 15. And the last octet is 255 because they're all 1s. And the last usable is just subtracting 1 from 255. There we go. Simple enough. Number of subnets. Well, how many subnet bits do we have? We had 2 to the power of 6. So that's going to equal 64. Number of hosts, usable hosts. And in this case, we had 10, because we had 8 here, 9, 10. And you can write that down. I know it off the top of my head because I've done this so many times. But 2 to the power of 10, take away 2 equals 1024. But remember, we do have to take away that 2, so it's actually 1022. And that's it. So that is how you figure out the second question. And the first video I've shown you question type 3 and 4. So hopefully I've covered everything. What I will do, just in case it helps, because I don't know if you got this, but I do have, I believe, here we go. I have another practice test. So I don't know if you have this one, but I'm going to put this on the screen so that you can test yourself with these questions. So if you want, pause the screen and look at these questions. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that, and then I'll scroll down to the last question and give you a time to do that as well. So I'll give you maybe 10 more seconds. Alright, I'm going to scroll down, so if you need to, just go back and pause it. But here's the last question, right here. And there you go. So just pause it here, write down the question if you need to, or just use this screen and you can see these questions. But now you have 2 practice tests. I would show you the questions that I used to answer this, but I think you have that one, and you can just go through these questions, or this video and the other video, and pause it and try to figure it out for yourself instead of listening to me explain it. But now you have as many questions as I had as for my practice test. Hopefully you have these, but if you don't, now you do. And like I said, I have questions I've given you. I will answer them. I've already sent Mauricio my feedback in terms of the first 2 question types he's answered. So if you have any questions, let me know. But this is the end of the second video, and this is the last video. I will see you tomorrow, guys, and good luck. Bye.